I want you to think of the last mistake that you made, how you handled it. That's mentally, emotionally, and then also just with other people, and what your ultimate corrective action was for that mistake. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes to go through, think about that mistake, and give you 60 seconds to come up here. So, and that goes for people with the last name starts with C. So that's not just.
Can you
anybody
repeat
else's
the
last name
question
starts with
again?
zero.
Like, I've made a lot of mistakes. Can you
Chamberlain does a big
narrow
Just
them?
think of your most recent one that comes to mind.
Like law enforcement?
Doesn't matter.
Oh,
Just
hell.
think of your most recent.
well.
Think of your most recent one that comes to mind. All right.
I'm
So I'm going to give you guys about 5 minutes to think on that while I continue to go through. So, who remembers who here has responded to an overdose?
None of us.
Yeah, exactly, right? Heroin's making a comeback. So is fentanyl. Anybody remember what it was like to go to their first overdose? Absolute shit show, right? Particularly if you've never been to one, never had training. You're trying to do it's always the crack whore girlfriend that's trying to do the half-ass kind of CPR on them or something like that that's not even working. And then the first one you do, you crack their sternum and you're like, maybe I should check for a pulse, and you realize they got about 60 beats a minute. So it's always a mess. By the time you hit your 50th or 100th one, you're humming the Batman tune and then Narcan as you're pushing Narcan up their nose, right? It becomes systematic. It just becomes something that you're used to. You're no longer really uncomfortable with having to go through that experience. And the same thing goes through everything from vehicle pursuits to, domestics, these sort of things. All right, so, Sheriff, Mark, anybody else with the last name is C, I'm not going to make you guys have to come up in class and talk, okay? I promise I'm not going to, no. I'm not going to do that, but I know exactly what's going through your guys' heads right now.
Not really.
You're like, no, I do not want to do this, right? But is it uncomfortable getting called out like that? Bullshit.
Oh, come on.
Well, we don't
Chamberlain doesn't make mistakes.
So,
That's not true.
yeah.
Here comes somebody that's still trying to make a name for
But
themselves.
for any of you that I didn't call on in here, were you thinking that you're probably next? You don't need to answer, but were you thinking you're probably next? Or that I was going to call on you next? Because I could have gone through and just put the entire class on the spot and had everybody go through one by one. Is that a little uncomfortable? I would venture to say that's a little uncomfortable having to talk about the last time you made a major fuck you lucky, and then you got to come up here and you got to talk about that, right? So, making you slightly uncomfortable, I want to see if this makes anybody else uncomfortable. We all know Tim Kennedy, right? Special operations guru. He is the man when it comes to MMA fighting and all this stuff. He has liberated a lot of minds overseas. And he's wearing a t-shirt that defines his persona. He is very comfortable with violence. How many of you are comfortable with a level, and I'm not asking you to respond, but how many of you, and this is a challenge for yourself, are comfortable with inflicting a level of violence on another human being that you couldn't even begin to fathom? Mark, I know you are, but that's just your sadistic side. But, no, seriously. I want you to imagine having to be in an actual fight with a suspect where you are close enough to smell their breath, you have to draw out your duty firearm, put it against their temple and pull the trigger. And you are going to have blood, brain matter, bones, tissue sprayed about the face and stuff like that. But the reason that you do that is because you want to come home alive. That's why you do that. Are you comfortable with that level of violence? So, it seems almost contradictory. What did I just talk about with the pinnacle of law enforcement? For the peak of your job is to be a life preserver, right? And then I'm sitting here talking about blowing a dude's head off at contact distances. Are those really opposed? We don't get these tools in law enforcement because they're meant to look cool on us, right? We don't get fast cars, we don't get tasers, we don't get guns because they look cool. We get those because what is the number one reason that we use lethal force?
To save another life.
Save another life. Absolutely. Whose life could that be?
Ours.
Could be very well our own, right? So being able to impart that level of violence and be comfortable with imparting that level of violence is the first step if you're actually going to protect life. Not asking you to be a complete psychopath or a sociopath, but I'm asking you to become comfortable with that. All right. Whoever's around my age might get this reference. For some of you who've never heard of a CD, it's a little bit, it's a round disc, and it goes into a computer or a compact disc player and used to play music and stuff before we had all this digital stuff. So, when I was a kid, right, like, back in the days of Limp Bizkit, Eminem, all this different stuff, you would get your little CD, and it would have a sticker on there that said parental advisory, explicit content. But of course, if you got that CD, you didn't want to have mom and dad see it. I know, like, for me, it was like, no, I don't want my mom or dad to see that. So you peel that sticker, because before it was, you know, now it's printed on there. Before, you had to peel the sticker off of there because you didn't want them to see that. You remember this at all?
Well, yeah, but what's weird to me is you're a far right-wing conservative and you were raised by a bunch of hippies. I'm surprised. It totally throws me off.
Yeah, but yet I like trap house music. I don't know what to say. But when I'm telling you and asking of you today, rip that sticker off, guys. Become comfortable with the level of violence that prior to today you probably were going to find yourself very uncomfortable with. And there's reasons for that. It's going to keep you safe. It's going to get you home alive. Scenario. So you're driving down the road. Speed limit's 40. This vehicle whips out in front of you, and they're doing 70. They're weaving lane to lane. Of course, what's probably the first thing you guys are thinking? It's a Friday night, 1:30 in the morning. Bars are letting out. It's probably some kind of white girl wasted. What is your approach to that traffic stop going to be? What are you going to do? You're going to come up. You're going to make like a passenger side approach, driver side approach. You're going to contact the driver. If they're wasted, what are you going to do? Probably pull them out of the car, start running them through fields. That's the plan, right? That's how we're going to approach it. How are they going to approach your stop? How do we know what it is that we're dealing with whenever we stop and contact the people on a day-to-day basis? It could be Tiffany, who's white girl wasted, or it can be Joe Shitbag that's got a stolen handgun underneath the seat and a 20-year backup in his trunk. And for him to kill a cop is not going to make any kind of a difference, because what's it going to matter? I'm going to prison for the rest of my life if I get caught anyways. So what's a few more years? Okay? So I say that because we don't know who we're stopping. But those people that we're dealing with, they always know who they're stopping. And if we're stopping certain people, just like the very first video that I showed you, when I didn't tell you about that, the suspect that was killed in that was high on PCP, meth, and cocaine, running around with his 6-month-old son in his arms as a hostage, he did 15 years for second-degree murder in Arizona. You think that man's probably a little more comfortable with violence than this officer who took that shot on that suspect? Yeah, probably. Unless this guy served overseas or has been in shootings before, I would venture to say this guy's pretty comfortable with it. If you're going to be able to meet that level of resistance, you have to be comfortable. Or you meet that level of violence, you have to be comfortable with that level of violence. Because sometimes what we're dealing with is we're dealing with venomous snakes. I use this as a comparison tool. So if you're walking through the woods and you see a snake, can you tell, like right off the bat, unless you're really good with snakes, are you normally able to tell if it's venomous or not? And this is for Missouri people. I don't have to explain this for you guys quite as much, but you can't tell right off the bat necessarily if it's venomous. Has anybody ever heard this wives' tale? The round versus the diamond eyes?
Yeah, that's not true.
Yeah, it's not true, but in Missouri, it's a pretty good rule for the most part. But I use this as an example because you go up, you have to get within a certain distance of that snake to be able to determine if its eyes are round or its eyes are diamonds, right? I can't tell from the back of the room whether or not that snake is. I'm going to have to actually walk up on that snake and get closer. Do you think I'm going to take maybe some precautions before I approach that snake to identify whether or not it's venomous? Yeah, right? I'm going to get the snake boots on, get a hoe, get a gun, grab my wife if she wants to tag along, grab Mark. I'm going to grab as much as I can to prepare because I want Mark to be the one to get bit, whether, he'll be my guinea pig. But we're going to do as much as we can because if that snake ends up not being venomous, we can kind of let our guard down, right, and handle it accordingly. Shoot off to the corner, not have to deal with it. But if that snake is venomous, I've already taken those precautions and those steps and prepared myself mentally. I prepare myself strategically, tactically, these sort of things, mindset, to be able to face that and encounter that. The same thing goes for law enforcement. You don't know if you're contacting a venomous one or a non-venomous one. The person that you're contacting knows exactly who's stopping them. You don't. Has everybody seen this video? Okay, this is extremely difficult to watch. I show this for purpose. I don't show this for shock value, I show this for a purpose. This is Deputy Dinkheller, Lawrence County Sheriff's Office, Georgia. He was put on an interdiction team just a year and a half on the job. He was handling the corridor, I think it was between Atlanta and Savannah, Georgia, where he was getting everything from DWIs to drugs, cash, that sort of stuff. So that was his job. He stops this vehicle, just like the scenario presented earlier, doing 98 on the interstate, and this happens.
Tyler, step back here with me. Come on back here for me. Come on back. How you doing today? You come on back here, keep your hands out of your pocket. Keep your hands out of your pocket, sir. Sir. Come here. Sir, come here. 37 rest 78. Come here. Sir, get back. Where are you going? Sir, get back. Now, get back. Get back. Sir, get back now. No. Get back. Fuck you. Sir, get back. I'm done now. Get back, sir. Sir, get back. Sir, get back. Get back. And I am not up. Sir, get back now. Get back. Get back. Get back now. There's never anything. Sir, get back now. Sir, get back now. Sir, get back. Get the door now. Sir, get the door. I'm doing my right. Get back here now. Get the leader vehicle. Get the guy down. There you go. Put the guy down. Put it down now. Put the guy down.
I never understood why he waited so long.
Dean Keller gave 35 verbal commands. 35 verbal commands before the first shot was fired. At one time, did we ever see this suspect obey his verbal commands?
But when he said get back,
Yeah. I mean, he's still yelling at him in that cyclic loop of get back while he's digging in the car, right? So we have a problem. How did we get, obviously Deputy Dean Keller, 18 months on the job, he's not the most experienced. How did we get to this point? Where we're in this cyclic rate and he's now dead on the side of the road, haven't been executed. How do we get into this? There are things that happen that have to lead up to this, right? Deputy Dean Keller is the only one that knows the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that, nobody here does. But when we start looking into the circumstances that led to it, we can probably get a little bit of an idea. Remember how Dean Keller says, I'm in fear of my life? Says that, kind of odd, isn't it? Make sure that if you shoot, it's a good shoot. And if not, you're probably going to lose everything you've got. Plus, you're probably going to go to prison. That was Deputy Dean Keller's in-service training at his sheriff's office, according to his old sheriff. Does that instill a level of confidence for you to use force lawfully? Or is that one of those things that you're going to be more scared about getting your ass suit off and going to prison? Because by God, I better make sure it's good, right? Even if it means I'm dead on the side of the road. Let's drive a little bit deeper too. So several weeks before the shooting, Dean Keller stopped the car for failure to yield to an emergency vehicle. Driver was a friend of the sheriff and complained to him because Dean Keller spoke harshly to him, right? Didn't yield for lights and siren. Dean Keller was told to write an apology by the sheriff and initially refused. Dean Keller told fellow deputies the sheriff ordered him to write it or face severe consequences. When CNN asked Sheriff Webb about this, he said, I just don't remember that. So when we talk about the number of witnesses to that, 5 of Deputy Dean Keller's coworkers confirmed that this happened? Are we getting a little bit more of an image as to why maybe things occurred the way that they did? We've all probably heard that story, right? About Dean Keller getting in trouble for talking harshly to a motorist. I don't know if you guys have heard that. That did happen. But of course, his sheriff unfortunately was a politician, wasn't about actual law and doing the job appropriately, throws him under the bus, and then what happens? What are the consequences of that? I would challenge you to say that what we witnessed, those are the consequences of that. He's apprehensive to use force. Why? Because the trainings that he goes to tell him that if he does this, he's going to get his ass suit off, he's going to lose everything, he's probably going to go to prison, even if he's justifiable, you just don't know. And then on top of that, his sheriff's going, I'm going to write you up. You're going to get severe consequences if you speak harshly to somebody. Even somebody trying to kill you. Please stop, sir. Well, Deputy Dean Keller's been shot multiple times. So, for those of you on patrol, are you going to let yourself, yeah. Do you have a question?
I don't know, but I'm really trying to analyze that.
So, I say that not to, this is not a knock on a sheriff, this is not a knock on leadership. This is something to keep in mind with your mindset. With your mindset when you go and approach calls for service. Maybe you did get a write-up. Maybe it was a justifiable write-up, maybe you disagree with it. But when you're going to that call for service and you're having to deal with that, is that the place that you want your mindset at? Focusing on, I don't want to get another write-up. Or is it focusing on addressing the issue and the problems that you're experiencing and dealing with at that time based upon a resistive subject? I would venture to say that's probably the better, that latter is the better way to look at that. But unfortunately, what ends up driving most of our actions, jumped a little bit ahead of myself, what ends up driving most of our actions? Fear, right? What is our day-to-day fear? Do we fear like a suspect killing us? Is that when we wake up in the morning most of the time? Or do we fear disappointing the people that we work for? Right? Getting that report rejected and turned back. I don't want to have to write another, I don't have to rewrite that report. I don't want to have to report another use of force to my supervisor. I've been in that position, so that's partly why I say this. What drives your fear when you go answer calls for service? When you interact with people? Is it the fear that I don't want to have to take paper on this? I don't want to have a use of force report on this because this will be my third one in 2 months. I don't want to have to deal with this. I don't have to deal with that. How is that fear driving and affecting your actions when you go into those calls for service? Because very well, as I looked at that situation, as we've looked at the situation with Deputy Dean Keller, it can alter the outcome, can it? It can make you apprehensive. It can make you make decisions that you don't want to necessarily make. Like this Patrick Swayze quote, fear causes hesitation, and hesitation will cause your worst fears to come true. How long did Deputy Dean Keller hesitate for? Over 2 minutes? 3 minutes? Where the first shot was fired?
And I'm just gonna, I've thought about this before, actually. If you weren't going to bring up his disciplinary action before, I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah.
But having said that, I highly doubt that's the problem.
Mm.
Because if he were aggressive enough to chew out the sheriff's buddy, and then go tell the sheriff, no, I'm not gonna write an apology, do you really think does that doesn't match.
True.
That doesn't match to me.
It doesn't necessarily match, but
What
he's,
tells me is he's not maybe the confrontational.
Maybe not.
He's not the confrontational type, which may be the problem.
what does Dean Keller have at this point though? He's got a 6-month-old baby at home and a wife that he's a single sole supporter for.
Right.
What's gonna be most important for him? His job. Maintaining that job.
Why, did he walk up to the window?
He never even got up to the window of the car.
Well, what kind of training is that?
Huh?
You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who on earth does traffic stops by yelling at somebody
Well, the
30
guy-
yards away?
That's
The guy
actually,
was already out of the
that's
truck.
very, those are very common interdiction tactics. Pull them out of the car literally
You don't
immediately
go
and
up
have
to
them come
them?
back to you. Nope. I've had multiple traffic stops. We actually have a trainer with street cop training. Kenny Williams is one who's pulled over 5,500 pounds of controlled substances and over $7.5 million in 6 years. He never conducts his traffic. If he pops out of the car like that, he just says, hey, come on back here and walk towards me. And that's normal. You're separating them from a 6,000-pound vehicle that could potentially drag you, hurt you, run you over, ram your patrol car. And more often than not, they keep the weapons inside of the vehicle separate off of their person. It's not
super
comfortable
afraid of
driving.
pistols, but I'm afraid of rifles. And if he's got one, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he did, was walk back to the truck. He should've,
Yeah.
he
I'm just saying, how did
hesitated.
he be up close before he can get to that rifle?
He
Well, the thing
hesitated
is,
far
though,
too
think
long.
about it, if he'd actually complied with Dane Keller's commands and separated himself from that vehicle, would he have ever had that rifle? If Dane Keller had used some kind of control tactics, gone hands-on with him,
Yeah.
instead of just verbal command, verbal command, verbal command, verbal command, a
Never-
complete lack of engagement,
Never
he's
let
never
him
gonna
back
be
to
able
the
to go
vehicle.
back and get that rifle.
Yeah.
So, he's never gonna be able to access that.
He was just
And that's, I mean, this is,
Afraid to
yeah,
fly.
and guys, this is why I look at this. This isn't me sitting there shitting on Dean Keller. This is not the purpose of this. This is looking at it going, why did he arrive at that point? There's some information for background that gives a little bit of elimination and a little bit of an idea of it. Is it the sole source? Like I say, I disclaim that and say Dean Keller's the only one that knows that answer and he's dead. So, but we can look at that stuff and say, if it goes in the back of your mind, not saying Sheriff you would ever do something like that, but if Sheriff's sitting there going, I know you back us 100% on stuff like that, but if you go through and you chew your supervisor's buddy or something like that, and they go, hey, you gotta write a letter of apology, even though the fatherly talk was absolutely justified, and you're sitting there thinking, man, that would probably have generated some hesitation with me, that's good to recognize. You need to know that within yourself. So here's another thing, I'll show you this one. This one's actually kind of an interesting one as well too. So this is where policy can kind of drive things. This is a double homicide suspect down in Sacramento. It's gonna seem like for a bit here I'm picking on California, maybe I am. But this is a double homicide suspect from Sacramento, California, driving a stolen truck, and he is known to be armed, and this is the felony style.
Did they know it was him?
Yes.
Get your hands up!
So during this, one of the officers was shot in the vest.
I'm hit.
You guys probably saw this if you were copping in 17 or following any like Police One. This was on social media of the bruise from the 380 round where he took it to his vest on this. This is kind of interesting officer involved shooting. Clear cut, right? Totally justified. Everybody would agree? I don't think there's any disagreement on that. Guy comes out shooting. He made a fuck you wucky. He gets to go in the forever box. But let's look at, there's multiple dash camera angles from this. And we're gonna see a lot of issues that we look at that and we go, why are they doing that? That obviously there's consequences for it. But I want you to look specifically, you're gonna see a guy in a tan uniform come around to the right-hand corner of the screen. I want you to watch his actions during this as well too. Keep in mind, this is a double homicide suspect in a stolen car, and it is known that he is armed.
Put your hands up where I can feel! Get your hands up!
Okay, obviously, I know a lot of you guys probably watch the officer on the left, not using his door for proper cover. What's an issue, if anything, we identify with Tan Guy?
He's walking up like it's nothing.
He's
Yeah.
a trooper.
What'd you say?
He's a trooper.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, California Highway Patrol, Eric Estrada. But why in the hell would you walk up on a double homicide suspect in a stolen car known to be armed without your gun out?
Well, I was gonna, what did he know? I mean, what did he know, and the other officers know he's there?
Every single one of them knew on this one.
Did they know he was there? I mean,
Oh, the trooper?
yeah.
Yeah, so, again, there's other videos of this, and this has actually now become a standard. This is back in 2017. This is now a standard in California. Use of force for California Highway Patrol. Drawing or pointing a firearm at a person requires use of force reporting to your supervisor, including a CAD RMS report, meaning you had to actually write a report narrative, and a use of force report on top of that. Again, guys, I'm not the trooper, but I could sit here and pull 100 videos like this from agencies where I can pull the use of force policy. And I'm not saying, this is not a dig at the agency. I'm not saying that if your agency has this policy that you need to get rid of it and trash it. But if you're on the road and you're going, man, I want to go to lunch in about 20 minutes. I'm going to help them on this traffic stop so I don't take that crash halfway around town. But yeah, sure as hell I ain't pulling my gun out on this one. There's plenty enough people and stuff. They've got me covered and everything. guess what happens? He still has to pull his gun, and as you see, he still has to discharge rounds to neutralize the threat on that. Would he have been better served? Would he have been in a better place if he'd gone up, posted on that passenger side door with his gun already at? Yeah. Would he have had to do paper? Yeah. So what? So what? But we hate paperwork, right? Nobody in law enforcement likes paperwork.
What's happening? We have sort of a problem here. Yeah, you apparently didn't put one of the new cover sheets on your TPS reports.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry about that, I forgot.
Yeah. You see, we're putting the cover sheets on all TPS reports now before they go out. Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I have.
Right? It's always the paperwork. It's the TPS reports, all the extra shit you're having to do. Who loves doing paperwork in law enforcement? Come on. Who loves it? Oh, there's no hands raising? Nobody likes doing that? So what do we do normally in our jobs? We try to HBO calls. We try to avoid paperwork, right? Even then when you're dealing with somebody like in the jail, you're dealing with somebody who's uncooperative. Is there a way that you try to go through and you try to take necessary actions to avoid paperwork, like a taser deployment, an OC deployment, a use of force? This is true. We do this sort of stuff. And it's not saying that one way is wrong, one way is right. But what it is saying, if we don't recognize that our actions can be driven by that desire to not want to do paperwork, to want to avoid certain things, we end up polluting our environment. We pollute our mind and we don't have a proper mindset when we're going to these calls, when we're addressing these calls, interacting with people. And you end up approaching calls with the wrong mindset. Your priorities get fucked up. Your priorities get the paperwork. I don't want overtime. I don't want to be stuck sitting here working extra hours when I can be at home with the family. I don't want to get an ass chewing from my supervisor. We all know Trooper Spiner, right? I don't want to get an ass chewing from my supervisor. Stilly, this is your third use of force in 2 months, you son of a bitch. So, or, if we keep our priorities that way, we could end up having a highway named after us. And that's the problem, because for Deputy Dean Keller, he was replaceable to his agency. And as much as, like Sheriff, I know as much as you care for your people, at the end of the day, people come and go in agencies. They are replaceable. Deputy Dean Keller was replaced by a nameless, faceless deputy with the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office. You know who he was not replaceable to? Deputy Dean Keller was a father, he was a husband, he was a brother, he was a son. He's not replaceable to those people. If your priority is stuck on the things that your agency requires of you, or what the media requires of you, under those circumstances, your mindset is going to be in the wrong place. That's where your mindset needs to be at. Your actual priorities, your focus needs to be on the things that are important to you, the things that are not replaceable. And to your families, to the people that love you, you're not replaceable. I want to take this as a side note. I don't think this is an issue with anybody in here, but I hear this often a lot. I've heard this on the Street Cops page quite a bit, where you get these people that they post on there, man, my agency, my department, my prosecutor, they're fucking me over, or they're fucking our department over. This is Atlanta and stuff like that. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna park up my car. I'm gonna sit in the parking lot. I ain't gonna do anything proactive. I'm not gonna do anything proactive. I'm gonna sit there. I'm gonna watch Netflix. I'm gonna play Angry Birds. I can do shit. I'm just gonna respond to my calls for service. Okay. What about these LA County Sheriff's deputies? Think that shelter them at all? What about these New York City police officers? Does that shelter them at all? Jesse Hartnett, Philadelphia Police Department. When your time comes, you're not going to have that opportunity to mentally prepare yourself if you've checked out and said that somehow sitting in a parking lot is going to insulate me, right? It's going to be like a vest with no panels in it. It's false hope. It's false security. Don't allow yourself to get comfortable in those circumstances, because your time will come. It may be a year from now, it may be a day from now, it may be a month from now, it may be 20 years from now, or for some of us, it may have already happened. At that time, that clock has started again for us. Keep your mindset right. Understand where your priorities are at and what's important. All right, that's the end of the first section. Is everybody good for me to go ahead and start in the second section? Yeah.
Take a break.
Yeah. Let's come back.
Everybody but Mark, we'll take a break.